this day in Jesus' name. So welcome. This is the church of I am your pastor, Michael T. Smith, and here is your message for the week of May 19th. We're talking about last week on women, girls, moms, and daughters. We're going to continue in that. We did not get too far in last week's message. And somebody says, well, I kind of understand for Mother's Day, but I was hoping today would be more of a message for men or more of a message for everyone. But isn't it though, right? I mean, isn't this for everyone on women, girls, moms, and daughters? Isn't this absolutely for men? Isn't this absolutely for everyone? Just open your spirit accordingly. I was telling Connie last night we were taking a bath and splish splash, we were taking a bath. And it was a Saturday night, right? Rub-a-dub, splashing in the tub. Thinking everything was all right. So anyway, I was telling her last night, I don't know if I've ever preached something more relevant to abundant life, if I've ever preached something more central to, and I've been preaching, 3.5 decades, more central to the heart of God, the heart of what it means to be in Christ. I don't know if I've ever preached anything more central to that than I have last week and this week. And I've got something planned for next week and something planned for the following week that I think we're striking finally. I was thinking about my daughter. She used to do, her and her best friend used to do this dance to, is it Mary Shackles? Is that what it was? Shackles off my feet. And they used to do this drop kick kind of thing. I think if I did that, both my knees would go out. I just want to praise him. We get the shackles of false religion off our feet. And now we can really talk about the essence of what it means to live truly as a spiritual person. So we ended last week in consideration of the phenomenon. And just take lots of notes today. I'm gonna feed you. In consideration of the phenomenon of the pay it forward element of violence, right? The pay it forward element of grooming and of abuse. And when I say pay it forward, you're in the drive-thru and somebody says, oh, it doesn't cost you anything. The car in front of you paid, and you paid for the car behind you, and so on and so forth. And with violence, particularly violence against women, there is a pay it forward aspect to it, right? There's this idea of that one abuser not only grooms for the abuse, abuser A not only grooms for the abuse that abuser A is going to carry out, abuser A grooms for and makes room for many times abuser B and C and so on. And now there's a pay it forward nature I gotta be careful. There's a pay it forward nature to this type of abuse. My wife, I was thinking of a situation that we had here. Situation's a bad way to say it, but my wife on occasion delivers groceries for a grocery delivery service, and we had a weird thing. Olivia went to school. Was it your first day? I think it was her first day at Porterview University, and parked her car and got a call from the police in the middle of her class. Somebody had hit her car, and she came out. That was the first day, and then like a couple of days later, she was pulling into a job appointment and hit a car, pulling in, and it was like never had a fender bumper bender or anything like that. And then, so we were like, golly, that sucks, and the deductible work and all that kind of. Well, Connie delivering groceries on her way out hit the car on the other side coming out, hit a mailbox on the other side going out, and she came home and she was upset. So we got all that patched up. And then, I don't know, I guess it was the beginning of the year. She was doing some grocery runs or whatever. And she came home and she said, I hit something today. And I said, I said, I'll stop playing. You're so funny. Connie said the funniest thing. She goes, no, seriously, I hit something. What night? What'd you hit? She said, I hit a wall. I said, you hit a wall? She said, yes, I was backing out of a delivery. I was parked in the wrong place and I hit a wall. And she said, on the back of the car, I hit it with a wall. And I remember, I said, are you okay? She said, yeah, I'm fine. And I said, okay, well, we'll just figure it out. And she sat down in the chair in our office and started crying. I said, babe, it's okay. I said, it's all right. It's just the car. She said, no. I mean, she didn't want to spend the money. I mean, that's the worst thing, or not the worst thing, but that she would hate that. You know how they say people are so afraid of public speaking that at a funeral, right? People would rather be the person in the casket than the one giving the eulogy. I think Connie would rather, say if you have to smash up the car or spend the money. She's like, man, just smash the car, just don't spend the money. So she was grieved about that. But as she wept, she looked at me and she said, just thank you for not yelling at me. And I remember freezing there in our closet, right? In our office is our closet. I thought you were in the office. You're in closet. Is this a true story? It is. The office is the closet. But she said, thanks for not yelling at me. And I could tell in her slumped shoulders, the way she slumped down in that chair, she's still projecting on me the pay it forward aspect of the trauma that has come forward. And in a weird, twisted, perverted way, I am a beneficiary of that pay it forward abuse, of that pay it forward rage. Why? Because if you come from a series of men who were verbally aggressive, violent, acting out, physically aggressive, blah, 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 it makes me look better, right? It makes me look like a real catch. And she says, you're just the greatest man I know. And I said, it's just because you've never been anywhere, or where you've been has come from a pretty rough and tumble patch of people. And so what's the pay it forward? I'm now benefiting from the value of my stock being elevated, not in and of myself, but how the trauma has informed Connie's estimation of her current relationship. And this is the nature of the whole world. We talked last week now about the statistic, the horrible statistic, which bears out, right, as you get into it, the idea that 1 out of every 3 women over the course of their lifetime will be a victim of sexual violence in some way. And you think that's just horrible, earth-stopping. We need to stop and deal with nothing else other than that, because it's that ubiquitous, it's that endemic, right? It's that we're saturated in that idea. But when it goes even farther when you consider that of the 1 out of 3, right? So many of the 1 out of 3 have been abused and victimized more than once by different people. And that is a phenomenon. If you talk to people who have been through this, you will find that I would say maybe 1 of 3 of the 1 of 3, maybe even more of the 1 of 3 of the 1 of 3, have been victimized more than one time by different abusers. And that says something very gross about our society. We say, well, 2/3 of women have not been a victim of sexual violence, but by the repeated violence against 1/3 of women, what it's indicating to us is there's actually more than enough violence to go around. There's more than enough violence for every woman. It's not that we're short on supply. They say there's like in the United States, and that's where I'm teaching you from here. And I know we have people in our church all over the world. And greetings to you across the pond, across the date line, across the borders. And but here in the States, they estimate, I don't know how many guns there are for every person, but let's just say we have 300 million Americans. There's 20 guns or something like that in the United States for every single person. Not every single person owns a gun, but there's enough for every 300 and something million of us to all have 10, 20, 30, 40, or whatever the number is. That's the statistic, which means there's enough sexual violence going on for every woman to have that experience. And so the fact that it's concentrated speaks again to the pay it forward. And you'll see cycles of women coming out of abuse, even going to places of therapy for their abuse, finding abuse from the therapist that's supposed to be there to help their abuse. I mean, this is the nature of the world, and this is not. Somebody say, "Well, I wish you would talk about, instead of talking about women, girls, moms, and daughters, I wish you'd talk about something more universal to everyone." What I'm telling you is this is universal to everyone. And if you're a man and say, "I don't think that's true," just talk to the women around you, all right? If you're a woman and say, "I don't talk that's true," take your best girlfriends out to Starbucks, get them all the new Summer Skies drink with venti light ice Summer Skies drink. This portion of the sermon is brought to you by Starbucks. That thing is addictive. I was a pink drink man until I tried the Summer Skies drink. Never had boba. Now boba is my favorite thing in the world. Just pop them. That's boba's cool. All right. Anyway, take them out and say, "Who do you know?" Talk to your mom. Talk to your sisters. Talk to your. I mean, it's find out from your grandma. Grandma may not have said anything about it. See what grandma says as the sun, the shade begins to set on the lower on her life. It's everywhere. And so the shame of this that people feel and that it's everywhere, but it's hidden below us. I talked to a guy one time. He's a photographer. He was this is back before drones, right? It would fly in helicopters and take aerial photos. And the guy was telling me that he had a photo of over the beach where I used to live in Florida. We used to go to New Smyrna Beach when I lived in Central Florida. And this guy would take aerial photos over the beach, and somebody was looking at the photo and says, "Oh, that's wild. That's New Smyrna Beach. What's all those dots in the water?" He said, "Those are sharks." And it's like, sharks? You mean sharks are in the water? Sharks are always in the water. We don't see them. We live by the suspension of disbelief that they're not there. We tell ourselves, and I mean, you got a better chance of being killed by a hippopotamus than a shark, which is very rare, depending on where you live, I guess. But they're everywhere all the time. And the fact that we suspend this out of our mind, we block this out of our mind, the same way our eyes block our nose from view. Our nose is blocking our view at all time, but our brain just says, we can't stare at that all day, so let's look past it. That's how we look past this endemic nature of this violence. And the shame of covering it and hiding it, and how it's easier often for affected individuals. Catch this now. How it's easier for affected individuals affected by sexual violence, and the micro and macro of society, right? Society's on the micro. It's easier for the family to say this doesn't exist. It's easier for the macro society, right? The small church and the large church. Think of the institution of the church. And we are a church, right? We're here at the church of today, or wherever you are. This is your message for the week. Think of the institution of the church. How chock full of violence, sexual violence inside the institution of the church. And, not just the Catholic Church, the Protestant Church, the male abusers, female abusers. I mean, it goes on and on and on. It inside the institution. But we ought not pretend, well, it's unique to the church. The institution, look at schools, right? Look at sport. We say, well, the church is so evil. And then you go, well, I guess Hollywood's so evil. And then you go, well, I guess the Olympics are so evil. And I guess colleges are evil. We're surrounded by it. In your micro community, right? In your macro community. And it's easier to block it out because it makes us feel safer in the world. To do as we often do with these things, we stuff it down for our own survival. We stuff it down for the survival of others. Very often, women stuff it down for the survival even of their own family and children. I remember talking to Connie, and again, you've read our books, and you've heard some of the story. Maybe she'll tell the full story one day in all of its glorious, grievous color, right? But I said, but what did you do? Why, where did you go? Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you do anything? And she said, all I knew was, as I pushed back the tears and held my skirt and straightened my shirt, she said, I just told myself I don't have time to be one of those girls. So it's a blocking out inside our individual soul. Right? And that inner blocking, right, becomes a micro blocking, that an entire family could exist and have no idea that a beloved family member has been through it because it's blocked and it's stuffed. And then in the micro within that, you could be married to someone. You could be parented by someone. You could parent someone. You could have it's there. So it's everywhere, plenty to go around, informing, affecting, shaping the reality of life as we experience it. We've come from it. We're over it. We're related to it. We're neighbor to it. We work with it. It's everywhere, but it is pushed down. But as they say, the body keeps score, right? The body keeps score. The brain keeps score. Conscious mind, maybe not, but the body holds on to it. Our physiology holds on to it. And not only does the body keep score, but also do the billions of us who are heirs of, beneficiaries of, recipients of the outworking of. You think about it. I talked to a precious woman, and she told me, she said, I'm having difficulty in my marriage, and I do how can I help sessions, and if you've never said, hey, I'd like to do a how can I help session, and we just talk about anything. Anything. It's not therapy. It's just conversation, love to love, right? So, but she said, I came out of an abusive relationship and I got into this relationship, and she said, I don't even know if I'm factoring in the idea of attraction. What I'm drawn to is safety. Think about that. that the romantic relationship I have is violence informed. That the choice that I made is not an organic choice. It's something I'm saying yes to, but it's a conditioned, manufactured consent. Well, did you have this? Did you have that? Did you feel anything physical? No, I didn't. I wasn't interested in that. All I was looking for was a safe man. Well, now that my emotions of safety have caught up with my practical safety, I'm realizing there's a void of romantic connection. How did you get in that situation? How are you in a situation that you don't know whether you should stay in, whether you should get out of because violence, right? It's pinball, right? Nudge you over here, kick you over here. Maybe you come up here, and king down here, and now you're on a path that your woman interrupted, right? Right. Girl interrupted. Okay. Why? What do they say? What do the experts say? The issue isn't what was done to us, right? But rather what everything done to us did to us. I like that. It's not what was done, it's what everything that was done, what it did. And the things that we've done to others out of that. Surely there are many a person who found themselves coming out of a violent situation, a violent relationship, a volatile relationship. And this could be anyway from actual sexual violence to intimidation. We talked about it last week, terror, right? That if you're a man and your romantic partner, your girlfriend, your wife or whatever is going around the kitchen tearing stuff up and I just can't stand this and I can't do this and I can't blah, 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 that the man watches that and kind of dodges the pan and dodges this, but is not really generally, most times, not universally, but most times not at risk for things getting too far out of control. But a wife or a girlfriend sitting watching a man in rage and flipping things over, she's got an entirely different dynamic. Her fear, flight, freeze, flight, fawn, fight is a totally different thing. Why? Because as long as he's on pans, it's okay. If he switches from pans to me, it's a different thing. All these micro things shaping us. The things what was done, how everything that was done, what it did to us, and the things that we've done to others. Surely there are people who have come out of that type of violence and found themselves in a relationship that was destructive to themselves, destructive to someone else. How did you end up getting here? Why are you into things that violate your dignity or rob others of dignity? Because of this ongoing idea, right? The villain-victim cycle. I won't call it endless, because I have to choose to believe that we can push back against this, right? But this violation of this violence, this encroachment upon personhood, it seeps out. It manifests. It gets passed on. Think of this, the violence-interrupted woman. The violence-interrupted woman in her violence-informed romantic partnership, rearing violence-adjacent children. The violence-interrupted woman, girl just going about the business of being girl, which we know from the Old Testament is a terrible thing to have happen to you, right? We know your mom had to pay a double penalty in the Old Testament. It's a boy. Oh, good. Whew, I don't have to pay as much. I don't have to sacrifice as many animals if it's a boy, right? I only have to miss church for a couple weeks if it's a boy. It's a girl. Oh, man, you know what that's going to cost me, right? The taxes, the girl tax is real. The violence-interrupted woman, in her violence-informed romantic partnership, rearing violence-adjacent children. Girl interrupted by violence. Her future romantic relationships are informed, at least in part, by that violence, right? Conscious and subconscious triggers. Rearing offspring, a product of a violence-informed romantic partnership, sometimes a product of a violent romantic partnership, affecting the rearing. So children are reared violence adjacent, right? I mean, this is where we are. If you pause to consider that on some level, the world entire has been fashioned in the shadows of sexual violence. And our levels of offense about it, and I'm not going to talk about this week, but our levels of offense about it, I often think about, I'm actually working on a little short screenplay. So I said, what's wrong with you? I had some of that everything but the bagel stuff, and I think I got everything but the out of my teeth there. I'm thinking about a screenplay, a little short, little television short, and this is really, brace yourself. Uh, um, um, you know, uh, I think of a framer, right? One of our framers getting out of bed in the middle of the night. Maybe Thomas Jefferson reaches over to his wife and taps her on the shoulder in the middle of the night. Maybe he's feeling frisky, and maybe she goes, "Oh, Thomas, I'm so tired tonight." And so he lays there. He's sweating. He's hot like an oven, right? And he just flings off the covers and throws on his night coat and is out the door. And he comes out the door, and of course he's got an enslaved individual who's awake and prepping stuff for the morning, and they say, "Oh, good evening, Miss Jefferson. Can I help you?" I said, "No, I'm just going to take a walk. Thank you." So Miss Jefferson goes over to the slave quarters, right, where the enslaved people live. There's a couple guys outside in the fire. They say, "Even Mr. Jefferson, can I help you?" He says, "No, I'm just taking a walk. I was wondering if I'm trying to think I'm trying to think of a name here. Anyway, I'm wondering if so-and-so is around, and they say, "Oh, no, I'll walk with you, Mr. President." It wouldn't be Mr. President. "I'll walk with you, Mr. Jefferson." No, you guys rest. Knock on the door, and the parents shoot up in the bed and they says, "Yeah, I was wondering if, so-and-so is around." And they say, "Oh, I'll go with you." No, you rest. Just tell her, come on, tell Sean to come outside and come with me. No, Mr. President, or Mr. Jefferson. And so you go outside, and they start taking a walk, and you don't see who Mr. Jefferson's walking with out in the moonlight, but you realize what's happening is his entitlement to this body, right? His entitlement to inflict violence on this body, until you realize that Sean, as you get out into the moonlight, Sean is a girl's name and a boy's name. And that he's not gone across to the slave quarters to pick up Sean, the little girl. He's gone out to pick up Sean, the young teenage boy. And now all of a sudden, you had to get that far in the story for most people to find offense to it. You had to get that far in the story of sexual violence that a man wakes up with people that he owns as property, can tap on the door of those people, select one out for sexual expression, and that is so enriched and deep in the American psyche as wrong but normal that it's not until it switches around that you realize he didn't go get a little girl out of the slave quarters, he bought a little boy out of it. Now some people say, "How could you ever say something so awful about our framers?" That's the part that's awful? That's the part that's offensive? That the president, Mr. Jefferson, didn't go get a little girl out of the thing, but he got a little boy out of it? Well, wait a minute now, you're trying to make it something inappropriate. It was always inappropriate, but it's so normal to us. The world created in the shadows of this violence. And it manifests. It manifests in women. It manifests in men. It manifests in parenting with hypervigilance, right? It manifests as extreme prevention and protection. It manifests as paranoia. I was, my mom has quite a story, she was at home one night. And somebody came through the window, and I didn't know any of this, right? But I remember being 5 years old. She was divorced from my birth father, and we were eating chicken at this chicken restaurant, and she was dropping me off at a daycare before sunrise and picking me up after sunset and swinging me through someplace to get me something to get home. She was living off of Benson and Hedges, right? And coffee. She didn't eat anything. And so she would sit there and watch me as I eat, back when you could smoke in every restaurant, watch me as I eat. And I eat, and I'm talking about my day, and then this happened, and that happened, and that happened. She says, "Let's wrap it up, man. We got to go. And I held up a chicken leg, and I said, "Hey, this is delicious. Do you think people could make something like this at home?" And my mother said she froze, like her son didn't even know you could make fried chicken at home. She said, "Okay, I'm going to start cooking. And she did 20 years later. But I remember being in the chicken restaurant, and these bikers came in, Hell's Angels types. I'm living in Central Florida. They would bike up and down, the coastline. And I remember they all were, you came in, and they got the leather, and they got the patches, and they got this kind of thing, and they're there. And I'm fascinated by the motorcycles because at 5 years old, motorcycles were cool. And I'm watching as they come in, and I'm looking. My mom said, "Stop staring. Stop staring. Michael, stop staring. Eat your food. Michael, stop staring. Eat your food." But I'm fascinated. I want to say, "Michael, stop staring. Michael, stop staring." And she looks at me, and she says this to me. She says, "Michael, stop staring. Those people can follow us home and come in our house and kill us." And at 5 years old, I had not yet considered that was a possibility, right? I thought, oh, they come home, I can ride the motorcycle. I had not yet, but guess what? Violence-informed parenting. Why would anybody ever bring that up, that they could follow us home and kill us? I'll tell you who would bring that up. Somebody who had been followed home. Right? So now this hypervigilance gets passed on. Now I am aware. I am afraid. I remember I would talk to my mom in my adult life. She moved out of state, and my family was living in Florida. I was living in. She said, "What'd you do today?" I said, "Oh, I went to a movie and it was great, and I watched this." And she said, "Well, who'd you go with?" I said, "What do you mean? Who'd you go to the movie with?" I said, "I didn't go to the movie with anybody. I just went by myself, and I had a couple bucks, and I got popcorn and some Milk Duds and a cherry Coke, and I just sat there and enjoyed." She said, "You went to the movies by yourself?" I said, "Yeah." She told me, "Michael, don't go to the movies by yourself. Only creeps and weirdos go to movies. Everybody in there's gonna think you're a creep and a weirdo." And I remember thinking, is that what people think, right? Well, it was probably 15 years later I found out she had been abused as a little girl in a movie theater. She's rearing me as an adult, rooted in the trauma that she's come through. This is, definitions of normal, definitions of appropriate, definitions of danger being passed on, not originating out of practical wisdom, originating out of trauma. Trauma that is hidden was never verbalized in my life. It wasn't much later till I was in my 40s that I even knew any of this had even happened. I didn't find out about it till my 40s, but it had shaped me all my life. Are you catching what I'm saying to you? Are you guys catching what I'm saying? So this is weird. I met my birth father last year. Somebody said, "I guess that's good." I heard one comedian talk about it. He said he was on a date, and this lady said, this lady said, "Boy, you have really interesting eyes." He says, "Yeah." He said, "I think I got them from my biological father." She said, "Oh, your father, are you close?" And he goes, "I'm pretty sure using the word biological implies that we're not close." I thought my biological father was dead. I hadn't seen him. Had no idea that he was even alive. Found out at almost 50 years old that he was alive, right? I thought he had died. I knew he drank. I thought he had died, and I found out, and very much alive. And I said, "Well, I'd like to come maybe see you," right? So we drove, and we went to see, and I got there, and there was nothing really there, right? It was nothing really there, and that's okay. I wasn't looking for anything, but just I didn't even know you were alive. And so we sat down, and I was like, hey, and it was like I could tell there was nothing there, and so I said. I thought, well, I'm not going to leave. I drove 7 hours. I'm not going to leave without getting. So I said, "Do you mind if I ask you a few questions while we're here?" And he looked at his watch. He said, "I got a couple minutes. Go ahead." And so I said, "Okay, great." So I just started asking questions. Well, who's your family? Where's your dad? I got all the way through, and I finally got around. "Tell me how you met my mom." "Oh man, we were this and that, and I was this, and I was living over here, and I saw." And so I get the story I've never heard. When your mom passes on, there's no place to ask. There's nobody to know. Who's gonna know? So I thought, let me get all this information. And after we talk, and we talked maybe about 45 minutes or whatever, and I guess he had some place to be, and we talked, and right in the middle, he goes, "Well, I guess you know what happened." I said, "What happened?" He said, "Well, I was at work, and I got a call, and apparently somebody had come in the window." And he said, "Man, I was so angry." He said, "I used to drive around the streets at night looking, trying to find the guy that blah, blah, blah." And just went through the whole thing. And he said to me, and this is interesting, this guy who was an alcoholic, had lost multiple marriages due to alcoholism, spent over a decade living on the streets, homeless due to alcoholism. We're sitting there, and just the question of, "Well, how'd you meet my mom?" And we talk all the way through this thing. And he says, "Well, you know what happened, did you?" And this and that. He said, "I was so angry," and he said, "I wanted to help her, and I couldn't get near her. I couldn't get this. I couldn't come here." And I tried. He said she was this amazing light person that was just so beautiful and so alive. And he said it totally crushed her. He said she couldn't sleep, she couldn't eat, she couldn't work. He said, "I tried to comfort her, I couldn't go near her." He said, "That's when I started drinking." He said, then about a year and a half later, she got pregnant, and we focused all of our energy on that. But I had already gone off, and he said, I was drinking. And he said it derailed the next 40-some years of my life. look at how much of the world shaped the falling out of the dominoes by violence, right? Pay it forward. Pay it forward. See, we have the biological inheritance, moms, daughters, mothers, girls, right? Combined with the environmental. And oh, how the biological feeds into the environmental and how the environmental feeds into the biological in healthy and unhealthy ways. I'm gonna watch my time. I'm doing okay. They say that that there are like 450 different things that go into our genetic makeup. That's how the same two people, the same mom and dad, can have 5 kids, and it's all this different combination. These eyes, that, this, the grandfather's this, the grandmother's this. You cross your legs just like your uncle. Is this? And I liken this: if you take 450 shot glasses, right, and line them up on the bar, and you start sprinkling different liquors in, and you take those 450, that's your firstborn child. And then you get different, you sprinkle them in different combinations, that's your secondborn child. It's the same batch of liquor, right, behind the counter. You got your wild turkey and your this. I don't even know, Sky vodka, or I don't even know what type of liquors there are, but whatever. I guess you wouldn't pour Michelob in a shot glass or whatever. Whatever the point is, you put all the vodka and gin and rum and you mix it, and you say, well, that's our daughter, and then you do it again, and that's our and guess what? Your shot glasses that you're pouring out of, you've got 450, and your spouse has 450, or your partner, and you're pouring those into. Your 450 came from 450, and their 450. So I mean, you go back, and there's a lot of mixing and matching going on here, and all of that goes to shape us, and certainly not all that we've inherited, right? All of our propensity, advantages, and liabilities are anchored in our biology. You know that it's not all the biology, but also the fact that we do have our propensities, our advantages, our liabilities coming to us being affected by our environment. So we have this inheritance biologically interacting with an environment that itself is shaped by those biological inheritances, which is itself shaped by the environmental reality. So it's kind of, nature and nurture, and nature and nurture, and nature and nurture, kind of like, hand on top of hand. And so here I am with my natural paranoia that I have, my natural hypervigilance that I have, that's come from my mother, that came from my grandfather, that came, he had nerves and, and just all these hives and all this other kind of stuff that he used to deal with, and come right. And I would always say, well, yeah, all of my neuroses come out of how the crazy woman I was raised by. And she could say, well, the crazy woman you were raised by was informed by all of this abuse and trauma. And then she said, but the crazy woman that raised you, which had all this, was raised by a man who would break out in hives and have nervous breakdowns. I mean, where does it even start? The biology shaping the environment, determining the reaction to the biology, or the biology determining the reaction to the environment, shaping the environment. And we get all the way back to the idea of a garden, right? The whole thing is that the whole thing of original sin is not this false idea that God's mad at the first people, and everybody that were born from those people, they're all going to hell because God's mad. The idea is that the brokenness that we experience is a shared one, that we're all partakers of a common human frailty that affected an environment, that interacted with our nature, that affected the environment. And it's this chaos that pours and fills and pours and fills and pours and fills that has made you and I today. And here, my children, my son, my daughter, my son is getting advice from a father, from a mother shaped by this. My daughter and son are getting advice from a mother who has been affected by, from a mother who's been married to a man who has been affected by. It is shaping the whole world. There's a song that my kids have hit me to by Noah Kahn, which Noah Kahn is what is it, Mike? He's post stomp clap, post stomp clap, and he's Jewish. Is that correct? And he calls himself what, Malone? A post shalom. What does he call himself? It's something like that. He's anyway. So he's a folky kind of. Anyway, Noah Kahn is just this beautiful song. They're like, Dad, you got to hear it. And I love Vermont, right? It's the season of the sticks. It's a long story. But so there's a line in the song where he says, Noah Kahn says this thing. He says, so it got me thinking that if I piled, man, I'm going to cry. He says, if I piled all the good upon my bad, that I could cancel out the darkness I inherited from Dad. I mean, it's a really thing that maybe if I just try to bury all this kind of stuff, I can push away that which was passed to me biologically. Now there's the thought. Wait a minute, you're talking about from Dad. I thought we were talking about moms. I think we are, right? As I reflect on the richness and complexity of my biological and environmental pass-through, right? What passed through my mom biologically and environmentally to me, especially being raised as by a single mom up until, for the first 8.5 years or so of my life, I got so much good from the biological, so much good from the environmental in both spheres. I received that, but also I realized this myth that I am an individual organism, right? I'm not an individual organism. You're not an individual organism. We're an ongoing expression of the same organism, really as of one creation of God. That's what you think about when Paul talked about all of creation groaning together, humans and nature, right? The natural world, all the cosmos groaning together in this idea of this environmental and biological pass-through. Every time you see a tree, you say, man, look at that tree. It's not that tree. That tree is the continuation of the tree that it came from. It's ongoing life. It's continuance. It's a continuation of the other. It's better yet, but it's also still the one, and it's still going. And maybe, I don't know who all's listening to the demographics of this as your church service for this week, but your pastor says this, maybe you have to be 50 before you see it, or maybe it's after your parents gone that you will eventually find yourself saying something like, oh my gosh, what I just did, that was my mom. I just said that like my mom. I just said that so-and-so. Or Connie will look at me and go, oh my God, that was so your mom. Or I'll look at her and go, that was a Leskovic eye raise right there. And you don't realize that maybe because you try to block it out all your life, but maybe when you get a little bit older, you start to notice it. Or maybe as parents pass on, you start to become aware of it. And it's a shock at first, like, I just said that. I just laughed. That's the exact kind of joke. Oh, the way you pointed right there. I mean, that's a crazy thing. It's shock, it's struggle. And then it's a humility to realize, wow, that I am not my own entirely. That I am biologically the continuation of something else. And guess what? I'm environmentally the continuation of something else. The bio is strong even without the environmental. My daughter, bless her heart, she inherited, guess what? She's had none of my trauma. I mean, everybody has trauma, right? Everybody's got, my mom was a wild woman many times, right? And I'm a wild person, but I've tried to temper it. We talked about it last week, how Connie and I have purpose to raise our children without the intimidation, blah, blah, blah. I give myself a B-. I haven't always helped to get. Somebody said, have you ever lost it before? Yeah, one time they disappeared at a national park and we could not find them. And when I saw them, they were like, hey, Mom, hey, Dad. I said, get in the car. Why'd you want them in the car? So when I went off, nobody in the Forest Ranger Service could hear me. What was that? Fear. All I could think was I'm screaming their name and they're 100 yards off the trail with a hand over their mouth and couldn't call for their dad. So yeah, I was freaked out a little bit. But come on, let's not talk about that. But Olivia has this hypervigilance, right? She's got this little sheepdog that's always got to keep the world in order, right? She doesn't know. She's had to learn how to go to a place. She had to learn how to go to a theater, had to learn how to go to a concert, and not the whole time be wondering if there was a shooter coming through the door, where would that shooter come from? Just to be able to enjoy the moment. And somebody said, well, man, she must have really been abused. She must have really gone through something traumatic. I'm telling you, it's not just the environment. It's the biological that gets passed on. Mikey does the same thing. Mikey, Connie and I fought for years where she'd say something. I said, I don't know what you're saying. She said, I just said I want to go shopping. I said, you did not say you wanted to go shopping. You asked what time the store closed. And we go on and on and on. And I'm like, she's like, you're crazy. I wish I had a tape recorder. I'm like, you wish you had a tape recorder? We did this for 20 years until she sat down to homeschool my son. And I can hear him at this table of the homeschool. Mikey, you did not say that. I did say that. And I just laugh and laugh and laugh. I'm like, you're like looking in the mirror. And up until recently, I had only assumed that my biological dad had passed on the potential for bad. Watch out for alcohol, you come from an alcoholic. Watch out for addiction, right? You come from this. I don't know who he is. I'm not in his environment. He was never drunk around me to cause trouble. Or I mean, I did see him once on a visit or whatever, but I was never traumatized. I never wondered where he was. I never lived through any of that kind of stuff. I was, and I thought, well, gee, I got to be careful from the biological, impartation that I got from him, because I know we're connected. I don't have the environmental, but here's the wild thing, that as I can see from my mom's biology and environment, I got good and bad. That was passed on, much more good than bad, 10,000 times more than good than bad. But I can't deny some of the trauma that came along with it. But here I was on the biological side with my biological dad, just saying, well, I got to be careful for the bad, never even thinking that, guess what? There are strengths that got passed on too. And it was so easy for me all my life to go, my mom is very smart, she's very creative, and look at all that I got, and all of the good that came from her biological and environmental, look at how rich it's made me. But never even made room for the possibility that good came from that other collection of shot glasses. So here I am. Certainly the environment of him and his addictions affecting my childhood and growing up without a dad the first part of my life, that shaped me. Certainly the biological. Somebody said, but you don't drink. Well, I know I don't, but I swallow, like John Candy said, I swallow my emotions and a lot of pepperoni pizzas, right? I mean, addiction and compulsion can take on a bunch of things. And I got certainly not the trauma that my mom got, not the same kind of trauma, and that's a whole different story, but I got that. And I have to admit that somebody said, oh, I'm so smart, I'm so this, I'm so capable, I'm so the kind of says, you're just so good at this, da-da-da. I can't say that only came from one set of shot glasses, because there's surely good that came out of the other shot glasses, and making room in our hearts for the possibility that we are not solely our own organism with our own sins, our own righteousness, our own suffering, our own victory, but we are heirs of an ongoing creation. Now here's a head trip. I may be doing things just like my biological father, but if a tree fell in the woods and there was nobody there to hear it, doesn't make a sound. If anybody in my family, if my children or my wife or anybody knew my biological father, they may say, every time you point like that, that's him. I have no idea. Here's the head trip. What if I took my family around him, which we're talking about, going to visit, bring my kids up, say, hey, this is who this is. My wife, hey, Connie's met her. Here it is. And just say, let's go have lunch together. Would it not be a trip if sitting there with my biological father, he crossed his arms and did something, and all three of us looked and said, oh my God, that's Mikey. Well, how's that possible? Mikey's never been around him in his life, because there is a dual impartation. Now, are you ready for the Goocher? I hope you're getting some out of this. With all my combustible chaos that I got environmentally and biologically from both of my progenitors, right? Here's the wild part. All those biological 450 shot glasses with their own environmental goodness and toxicity, right? The plus and the minus. All of them were set down in an environment with the man who raised me. Pop-Pop, right? You all know Pop-Pop. It's like, yeah, Pop-Pop's there. Pop-Pop is here. Think of this. Man, this is going to make me cry. All of the volatility of my shot glasses from multiple generations over time. And guess what? My biological father came from addiction and abuse. Environment, biology. My mother, environment, biology. My mother's father, my grandfather, who I love very much, drank himself and smoked. I mean, so it's all tumbling down. My grandmother's father, addiction, so it's all tumbling down. All of that was set down in a home environment with Pop-Pop, who adopted me when I was 8.5, or well, I guess a little older by the time all the paperwork went through. And he's the only one in my life that I only got good from. I have inherited zero negativity from Pop-Pop. Now, he may have negativity biologically. I don't know. I didn't get it. There may be negativity in his environment. I don't know. I didn't get it. He came into my life. God brought him into my life as a sole entire, for 40 plus years, as a channel of good. So if there's any chaos in me genetically, Pop-Pop says, don't look at me, like that kind of stuff. And whatever happened before he got there, he says, I wasn't on the shift at that time. But all he has brought into my life is good. So I come up with my shot glasses, filled by shot glasses, but those shot glasses have been set in an environment, and a stepfather environment could be a very volatile place. But mine got set in an environment of total love, kindness, infinite patience, humor, a sense of justice, love for my mother, consistency and humility in marriage, all the environmental, all the biological combined to be set in an environment that would turn that volatility toward the light. This is how our lives, how our world is framed. My mom has passed on. Connie's mom has passed on. Connie has been shaped and is being shaped by the affirming and unaffirming impartations, affirming her past and unaffirming her past, affirming her future and unaffirming her future. And I am being shaped by Connie, and my kids are being shaped by us, and their future spouses and kids are being pre-selected and filtered in and filtered out and found attractive or found repulsive, all by this. All of this makes me greatly, makes it difficult, all of this which makes it greatly difficult to properly appraise any of our mothers with appropriate grace. Because we got from them, and moms get a bum rap. But before moms get the bum rap, moms are most often heirs of the bum rap. Motherhood, I'm closing here. Motherhood motherhood is beautiful, maybe, but it does not allow life to stop. It does not allow time for processing. It does not allow time for healing. Moms become the life givers, caregivers, literally taking of themselves way past childbirth, sacrificing themselves for the prosperity and health and protection of their offspring while dealing with their own chaos, errors, and past environment and present, their own volatility of their shot glasses. And motherhood, listen to me, is no doubt a blessing for many. But guess what? Non-motherhood is a blessing for many. For some, motherhood brings healing. That's what my biological father told me. He said, we were dealing in the trauma of your mother's assault, and we were just kind of numb. But when we found out she was pregnant, we both got happy. Like here, we can put it all, like at roulette, we can put it all on the baby, and the baby will solve. But the baby doesn't solve. But sometimes the baby gives a mom something else to focus on, to pause for the sake, and they're not healing by focusing on the child. They're not healing, but they're at least pausing to divert their attention elsewhere, their energies elsewhere. Instead of picking the wound, I've got something else to obsess over. There's a healing aspect of the diversion of preoccupation. But motherhood cannot be entirely healing or entirely fulfilling, because motherhood, although it gives the illusion of healing, it really only oftentimes opens a space to be open to healing. But even after motherhood, after the exhaustion of the initial stages, there are questions. Questions, did I do it right? Questions of how much of my chaos internally and environmentally shaped my children. Has it shaped them for the better? Has it shaped them for the worse? Did I protect enough? Did I overprotect? Did I not? All of this complexity. And it gets down to deep things of, should I have had kids? Should I have had more kids? Is a torment. Should I have had kids? That's a torment. Yes or no? Should I have had kids at all? Yes or no? Should I have had more children? Should I have had less children? No mother ever thinks that. Of course they do. Not all mothers, but some mothers certainly think, I had 5 kids. What would life have been like if we had stopped at 3? What would my life have been like if we hadn't had the surprise this? Or things were bad and the surprise happened. There's no way to know. But here is the truth. There are mothers who are realizing that motherhood has not solved everything. It's a diversion, it's rich, and it does have its rewards, but sometimes I realize mothers are so good at being mothers and so good at making their children not feeling vulnerable and afraid that the children do not appreciate what the mothers have invested in them. I was telling Connie the other day, I said, I pray for my son. my son is going to have a doting, obsessed, leaning on his shoulder, looking up at him with gaga eyes. How can I help you, wife? And she said, why? I said, because you make that boy's world perfect. Well, if a child grows up feeling neglected and not seen, and they compensate by that for making sure their children never feel that, is that a win or a lose? I don't know. Guess what it is? It's just a different face on a different problem. And you had to overcome what you didn't have, so you made sure your children have what you didn't have, and they may have to overcome having so much that they didn't really learn to be appreciative of life. Everybody has something to overcome. And if all we're going to do is blame why we are the way we are from where we came, instead of saying, God, a bunch of dominoes have formed me today, but I thank you that you can bring me into wholeness and you can make my generations a little richer than the generations I came from, that is the hope that all of us must have, and that all of us must reach out our hearts to receive. So, is it bad that a mother has felt relieved at a miscarriage? No. Because the motherhood is, well, I was heartbroken about miscarriage. Not everybody is. Some people find out they're pregnant and they're afraid, deeply afraid. Is it wrong to be relieved that you miscarried when life and chaos internally and externally is so volatile and you can't tell anybody that you have to fake grieve on the outside, but inside in the most secret place that only God sees, you sighed a sigh of relief? Is it wrong to be grateful that at X years ago you had an abortion? Oh my God, that's the worst thing in the world. I'm not talking about right or wrong. I'm talking about the reality of the human experience. It feels weird that when we talk about dads, that dads thought they were having a baby and found out that they weren't, or thought they were, and I'm not going to say it, but man, I'm actually glad that I thought she was pregnant. She turns out not to be. Is it wrong to sigh a sigh of relief when a woman finds out she's not pregnant? Even a married woman finds out, I thought I was late, but I'm not pregnant. Well, that's a horrible thing to say. We should always be giving at all places and at all times, and we get conditioned to that, but we realize that giving and preoccupation over making it richer for the next sometimes never lets us address what was broken and hemorrhaging inside ourselves. And the truth is, all of these feelings are real and honest, and they're known by God. Most importantly, they're not only known by God, even if they're not said, even if they're hardly said in our own hearing, in our own hearts. More importantly, all of these feelings are understood by God. Where we came from, how we got where we are, how violence affected us, how it's still affecting us, how we're trying to push it back in ourselves and keep the next generation from it, how we're trying to make our tomorrow not as affected by the trauma as our yesterday. I mean, God is aware of all that. He understands, or God understands all that. It's understood by God because God knows that certain parts of us mean certain things at different times, in different ways, in different ways. That yes, at one time I can say, what would my life have been like if I had children? And the other part of me can also say, what am I talking about? It's awesome that I had children. What if I had more children instead of this? Or what if I had less children? What if I stopped at 3 instead of 4? That God can accommodate all of those things, because the whole point of the incarnation is that God entered into the human experience with all of its messiness. And God declared, I use the male pronoun, God declared that by entering that and affirming that human experience with all of its complexity and messiness, that human experience, when the scripture writer says that God, when God became human, felt every single emotion that humans feel. That's supposed to tell us that God sees and understands even the secret things that we don't say to anyone. So we close back where we started last week. Pastor Mike, I hear you, but again, what does all this have to do with Christianity? Not too much. But it has a lot to do with the person of Christ. And at this church, the church of your church, I'm your pastor, this is your church, this is your message. At this church, I want you to know that this church is built not around the traditions of Christianity, but around the centralness of the person of Christ, who the story of Christ is sourced in. It revolved around, associated with, focused on, and depended on women. Women in controversy, right? From his own mother to the woman at the well, to the woman who was untouchworthy, women who were untouchworthy, one who had bled for 12 years and another had wept at his feet. One said, a crowd said, don't touch her. The other ones told the woman, don't touch him. The woman who was a literal stone's throw away from an honor killing. He rescued to the barren woman, to the bereft mother, to the woman who supported him financially, some with the support of her husbands, some without the support of the husbands, and some who were great women who didn't need to ask a man at all, but said, I will support him, that he depended on, to the politician's wife and spoke up to her husband and said, leave this man alone, to the very woman who would come and take his naked body and dress it tenderly in love. He was surrounded by engaging with women in supposed scandalous controversy, women who were under constant suspicion and scrutiny, women who were labeled as as an evil woman or an unclean woman, but women who were not seen or understood. They were eyed but not seen. They were one-dimensional characters, either cast as virtuous or vicious. They were NPCs, non-player characters. They were just the harlot, the adulterer, the seductress, the barren woman, the foreigner. They were not allowed to have backstory, bereft of backstory, deprived of any aggravating or mitigating biology or pathology that led them to be who they are, devoid of the permission of a girl-interrupted past, disqualified from a girl or the possibility of a girl-recovered future, and yet Jesus sees them all. And Christ today, Christ before Jesus, Christ after Jesus, Christ as cosmic God. We're talking about God in love in the person of Jesus, and God personalized in Jesus saw them all, and God as Christ as love, the mind of the cosmos, sees them all today, and God accepts and sees their beauty and perfection as biological bleeders, sexually complex creatures, as both objects of desire and possessors of desire. God sees them all as capable of domestic, social, financial, and societal thriving. God sees them all as susceptible to disastrous choices at the cost of their own dignity, and the same way that men are susceptible to disastrous choices at the cost of their own dignity and the dignity of others, the same way men are. But in many ways, God sees that women pass their lives and their existences in a vulnerability that men could never understand. And Jesus saw that then, and you have to think about it, how controversial it was. And in the Bible stories, Jesus saw these women, appreciated that their lives were different from men. He appreciated their story. He saw their light. He contributed to their dignity and their self-narrative and then their others' narrative. And what's so amazing about it is he did all of that in rebellion to the religious thinking of his time. I heard a quote by James Finley. It said this: "It's such a powerful experience to be in the presence of someone who sees our brokenness. Maybe because they live with us and it's obvious, or maybe a therapist or a friend or at a recovery meeting, and someone who not only sees our brokenness, but sees through our brokenness to the invincible preciousness of ourself in the midst of our brokenness." And if that doesn't describe what we know to be true about Jesus, Jesus saw through everybody's brokenness, knew there was a story of how they got there before they got the label, and could see through that brokenness to the invincibility, the invincible preciousness of themselves in the midst of the brokenness. Think of the woman caught in adultery, stones throw away. We could talk for hours on that. But think of the statement, "I don't condemn you." What is that? I see the path that got you here. Go and sin no more. I see through that broken path your invincibleness, not to be degrade yourself or others or devalue others as an object or possessor of desire. There's a healthier way to express this desire, and you are not subject and victim to that. And the fact that somebody could see, I don't condemn you because I understand the dominoes that got here, but I leave you empowered to say you are also able to live above the corruptness, the dehumanizing corruptness that we engage in. And there's so much to that to say, okay, but I'm not around when Jesus walked the earth, but Jesus was just a scoop out of the bathtub, a little teaspoon of H2O, but the H2O that permeates the universe. God and love permeate the universe, and you can stand there as man and woman, male and female, as a woman, a mother, a daughter, a woman, daughter, girl's mom. You can stand there and say, love today sees me through whatever volatility that I have internally or environmentally, and sees my invincible preciousness within that volatility. And that to me is powerful. And it makes me feel like I'm aligning with God if I can partner my sight to see that as well. That maybe I could express my religion seeing beyond labels, but not just the harlot or the adulterer or the sex worker or the whatever or the prostitute or whatever. No. In my own home, across my dinner table, to my wife, to my daughter, to my neighbors, to my mother and grandmother, to my sisters? Can I see with those Jesus eyes? See a person more vulnerable than I am, but not defined by that vulnerability. See a person with complexities of dominoes environmentally and biologically that I cannot begin to appreciate, but I can sympathize or empathize with to try to reach to be that voice of, I see you. That to me feels like I am embodying Christ. And that's what I want to do. But it's not only what men should do, women should do this too. Step back and think of the journey of your fellow women. The journey that has happened, the journey that they're on. The journey that you are on, that your mother was on, that your friends are on, that your daughters and granddaughters and daughters-in-law are still on. Don't ever look at them in an isolated window of the present. Think of the biological and environmental that have informed this present, but think of the precious, the invincible preciousness that informs that future. Now we're approaching the world with Christ's sight. And now we're out of time. This is your message for the week of May 19th. I thank you so very much for for your support. Remember, the agreement is twofold. We will empower you to live by this teaching. And when you say, man, something you said, about 5 minutes of what you said really made me see the world a different way. Look, I talked for an hour. I can't give you an hour of revelation, but if you got 5 minutes of it that changes you as a person, as a man or a woman, a mother, a father, a daughter, a human, then we want you to show appreciation. We're empowering you to live, and we want you to say, hey, I create value. This is the condition of our church. We are a church, and the condition of our church is, I'm going to hear my pastor preach something, and that is going to change my life in the micro. And in response to that, I'm going to say, thank you. Here is the support. I'm going to create value by showing support. And all the ways are there on your screen. But that's only one half of our church. The other half of our church is this. We're not only teaching you, we want to teach you to live empowered, we want to empower you to love. Well, this isn't really a church. Stop pretending it's a church. It's 1,000% a church. Only instead of service being over and a couple of guys vacuuming and a couple of people cleaning up the children's ministry and some people checking in and out of the youth ministry and some people working in the parking lot, guess what? The sermon is over. Well, what am I going to do with all that time? You are going to figure out how to see the world around you and engage it with love. You're going to build community among the suffering. You're going to say, I have no religious bounds. I have no LGBTQ bounds. I have no political bounds. I'm a human, capable of loving and connecting with every human. God, bring humans across my path. Bring opportunities on the micro and the macro to push back on suffering, push back on injustice, just to be walking through a Lowe's parking lot and see someone and not try to be kind to them, to convert them, to get them to say a sinner's prayer. Ridiculous. They're already in God. You're just going to wake them up to the reality of God's love for them. You're going to be Jesus walking down the street, not signing up people to get on the right team, but bringing sight and empathy and action. That's what I want you to do. So service is over. Do I have to walk out? Do I have to go clean up? Do I have to direct cars? Do I have to cook out meals? You got to do all that, just not here at church. Put all of that energy, not into the building or the institution. Put it out into the world. If you want to reach the third world, great. If you want to reach the second world, great. Reach your dinner table. Reach your neighbor. Reach your coworker. Reach your own family. Love. Live charitably. So, that's your agreement. This is our conclusion for this church week. I bless you. Peace, prosperity, favor, light, Zoe, shalom, nothing missing, nothing broken. The goodness of love in the land of the living, that you would receive love and that it would overflow through you and to you and through you upon all who come in contact with, that they will know they have encountered the body, the embodiment of Christ, the ongoing embodiment of Christ. That peace would overtake you, divine direction, divine override, leading and guiding you into the best, putting you in places that you didn't even plan for, but you see goodness has been prepared ahead of time. I declare that over you and yours. I bless you. I bless you. In the name of God, in the name of Christ, in the name of love, I call you blessed, overflowing to be a blessing. And all that receive that say, amen. This is our message for the week of May 19th. I'll see you back next week for May 26th. I'm your pastor. This is your church. And just declaring You've been empowered to live. Now you've been empowered to love. Go out and make a mark. And guess what? We're your grandpastors. Tell us how you're reaching people's lives and touching people's lives in your new church. Tell us how you had church all week long. It's not bragging, well, if I do that, I'll lose my reward. No, if you do good in order to get the approval of man, that's when there's no return. But if you do good just to do good, we're not your pastors, we're your grandpastors. We're proud of you. We want to hear about all the good things you're doing. It'll inspire us to inspire others. Make it a great week. God bless you. Connie and I love you. My whole family loves you. I'll see you in church.